Sea of Thieves is a whole boatload of fun, but with its non-linear open-ended structure, it can be surprisingly tricky to get started on your journey to becoming a pirate of legend. So, to start you on the path to glory, rather than the lonely road to Davy Jones's locker, here's how to get started in Sea of Thieves. First up, pick your pirate carefully. When you first start the game, you'll be presented with a selection of randomly generated characters. You can ask it to make you a new batch as many times as you like, and you can also lock in potential candidates as you continue to browse. Make sure you're happy before making your final selection, mind you, because your choice will be permanent. As you progress through the game, you can equip different cosmetic items like eye patches, peg legs, hook hands, new hairstyles, and beards, but the base pirate will remain the same. Once you've picked your pirate, you'll be asked whether you want to set sail on a galleon or on a smaller, more fragile sloop. Being considerably larger, galleons take a lot more work to sail successfully, but they are also a lot harder to sink. Other pirates might think twice before trying to board you and plunder your vessel, in other words. So while you can set sail by yourself, I'd heartily recommend joining a crew. Preferably with friends, but even setting sail with a bunch of randoms can be better for your fortunes than going it alone. At this point, you'll finally jump into the game, starting out on Sanctuary Island with quite a hangover. It's here you can find representatives from the 3 different factions that form the backbone of the game. The Merchant Alliance will reward you for rounding up different animals and bringing them back within a certain time period. The Gold Hoarders will ask you to bring them buried treasure from certain locations, and the Order of Souls like it very much when you go and kill skeletons for them, and then bring back the creepy whispering skulls of their leaders. You're free to do missions for these factions as often as you like. They have to be bought with gold from your reserves, but voyages are free at the beginning, so don't worry too much if you haven't got any pieces of 8 to your name. Completing voyages will increase your standing with each faction, opening up more complicated missions with better rewards. Be warned, however, that you can only hold 3 voyages at any one time, so if you buy 3 from the Order of Souls, you won't be able to pick up any voyages from the other 2 factions until you've cleared at least 1. You start a voyage by heading onto your ship and putting the voyage itself down on the captain's table in order to propose it. Each crew member will vote for the voyage they most want to undertake by throwing a knife at it, as one does. At this point, you're ready to set sail. You can check where you're going and what you're doing at any time while on a voyage by bringing up the radial map menu with E on a keyboard or RB on an Xbox One controller. You can also show other crew members what you're looking at with the right mouse button or left trigger.
I'll tell you where we're going. Here. This place. Here. Right here, my friend.
Nobody said you had to be sensible with it, of course. Anyway, from there it's a matter of getting to your destination, finding the items you need, loading them back into the ship, and then sailing to the nearest outpost in order to trade them in. As I mentioned earlier, you can use the gold you've earned to buy more voyages, but you can also use it to buy new items. These include cosmetic items, but also better versions of your gear, a shovel that digs faster for instance, or simply a nicer looking accordion. That, in a nutshell, is how Sea of Thieves works, but there's a big difference between getting the gist of Rare's silly swashbuckler and attaining true mastery. The rest of this video then is more of a list of useful tips that will land you in better stead on your continuing adventures.
Sounds slightly to port.
But I'm playing the hurdy-gurdy!
No, there's no one driving.
Firstly, voice chat is pretty much essential. You can play Sea of Thieves as a mute pirate by all means, but in a game that relies so heavily on crew members sharing responsibilities and working together as a team just to keep the ship afloat, you'll have a much easier time if you just talk to one another. Not talking leads to a whole bunch of vague gesturing, and to be perfectly honest, it can be quite frustrating. Once you've got communication sorted, it's a good idea to work out who is doing what as you sail the seas. You can't see where the ship is on the game's map, for example, without going to the map table below decks and having a good look, but having the person manning the helm and actually steering the ship going to check it every few minutes isn't very efficient. And worse, it actually might prove dangerous if they aren't there to steer around a previously unseen hazard. It's much better to put someone else on map duty instead, having them report to the helmsman or woman how they're doing over voice chat or text chat in a pinch. When they're not checking the map, they can do other tasks like trimming the sails and keeping a weather eye out for approaching storms or enemy vessels. Now, these tasks may not sound as exciting as steering a massive galleon, but trust me, they're absolutely vital, especially learning how to trim the sails. It may sound stupid to point this out, but the ship will travel much faster if the sails are catching more wind. Pointing them forward and hoping for the best simply isn't good enough. In order to get the most out of every inch of canvas, you can adjust the angle of the sails to best suit the wind direction. If you look up, for example, you should be able to spot some little wisps of wind showing which way it's blowing. Simply line the sails up so these wisps are travelling directly into the sails, and they should blow out with a satisfying whoosh. It's a quick job, but one that makes all the difference, especially when sailing into the wind, when tacking is your best tactic. That is, sailing at an angle to the wind and zigzagging your way forward, changing the angle of the sails to keep yourself going in vaguely the right direction. As important as learning how to trim is, however, it's equally important to know when to clue up and get some of the wind out of your sails. In other words, putting your sails at full length into the wind will give you every possible bit of speed, which is great when fleeing another vessel or making progress on a long voyage, but it's far from ideal when you're coming in to explore an island or dock at an outpost. Approaching at full speed and throwing down the anchor is, well, to be honest, it's quite a lot of fun, but it's also pretty dangerous. The strain on the vessel might be enough for it to get a hole in the hull, or worse, you might misread the situation entirely and end up running aground. Storms can also be a serious menace if you have too much canvas spread. The extreme winds can put enough stress on your ship that it'll start leaking like nobody's business, a problem that can quickly become serious enough to sink you entirely. Sailing around a storm is better, of course, but knowing when to take in the sails will save you a lot of hassle and potential heartache. Again, conversation is key here, as other crewmates may be too busy tending to other duties to know when it's time to furl the sails. Even if you're not travelling at breakneck speed, mind you, make sure you don't take your ship too close into land. You're not parking a car, after all, and you may not always be able to see where the sandbar is when coming to explore an island. It's better to drop anchor a bit further out and shoot yourself over with a cannon than risk destroying the vessel altogether. You can swim even when holding a dirty great treasure chest, and while there are sharks, and yes, they will try to eat you, they actually aren't super aggressive, so risking your skin rather than the entire ship is almost always preferable when there's loot at stake. Talking of loot, when exploring an island, you're likely to find a bunch of barrels with supplies on them, as well as buried treasure or reanimated skeletons. And sure, planks and bananas may not seem as exciting as a chest full of loot, but don't overlook these, whatever you do. Even if it takes several trips, make sure you get every single one of those planks on board, because if you run out and get another hole in the hull, you're done for. You can carry quite a few planks at once and then store those in the barrels below decks, and having a well-stocked ship can genuinely make the difference between sinking or not, so get into the habit of resupplying whenever you can, including when you visit outposts or pay a visit to Sanctuary Island. As jealously as you should guard your ship's supplies, however, it's quest items you should really keep an eye on at all times. You can probably trust your own crewmates, of course, but the thing is, you won't get the rewards from a successful voyage until you actually go and turn them in. If a rival crew comes and pinches the loot, in other words, they get to reap the rewards instead of you. This is a pirate game, after all. If you're travelling back to port after gathering some quest items, then you should keep a weather eye out for enemy sails. If it's nighttime, you can help stay hidden by dousing the torches at the fore and aft, as the light from these can be seen from quite a long way away. If you do get attacked, of course, you can choose to stay and fight, or put those well-honed sail trimming skills to the test and attempt to flee. If you do have to fight, remember that cannons need to be loaded by taking a cannonball to the front of the cannon, and that it's better to aim at the hull of the ship just below the waterline. Blowing a hole in the side of the ship is all very good and well, but if it's not letting in gallons and gallons of seawater, your opponents won't be especially bothered. Hopefully you'll make it through such encounters relatively unscathed, but sadly, not every pirate is quite so fortunate in Sea of Thieves. As you go about your business then, keep an eye out for flocks of birds circling overhead. These mark the sight of sunken vessels, waiting patiently for you to come on board and plunder them for all they're worth. Do not pass these up, especially in the early game, as you can find items that are worth a lot of money. If you're completing voyages in exchange for about 200 gold pieces, a chest of exquisite spices worth 1400 is nothing to sniff at. So be ready to profit from the misery of others at the first sign of a seagull. And that, me hearties, is how to get started in Sea of Thieves. Hopefully you found this video useful, but if you have any tips of your own, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. Keep an eye on Eurogamer for plenty more on Sea of Thieves, including live streams, more tips, and let's face it, probably some very silly voices. Thank you very much for watching. Bye!